We like to refresh this conference every year, and we never really ask the same people back, except for two people. Kat Greenleaf, who'll be here again, and the amazing Lori Hiltz. As you'll see, Lori is kind of diminutive, not much personality, not very smart, you know. You wouldn't notice her when she walks in a room, but Lori evidently is terrific and one of the great leaders in advertising, the CEO of Havas North America. Lori, come on up.
Good morning. First of all, where's Mark Kidd? Captivate. I have to tell you a story. I actually met Barry Fry in a taxi cab 4 years ago at the A&E up front in that archaic model of buying shit that you don't know about, right? That. I met him in the back of a taxi cab. I actually paid for the taxi cab ride, right? And here I am 4 years later standing up here, and my life changed because of Captivate Media, because elevators everywhere, taxi screens everywhere. I've gotten phone calls from Kansas City, Los Angeles, Detroit, because place-based media, digital place-based media works. So thank you, Mark and Barry. But I listened, and we are here today to talk about things and change in our industry and agency models, et cetera. But why are Rashad and I here? Well, first of all, we both have the privilege of working for French ownership. Mine's family-owned, and yours is owned by that guy, right? We have the love of Chicago. I transferred into the Chicago market about 6 years ago with Havas. I'm still a Detroit Lions fan, but I actually like the Bears just as much because they're losers too. So Rashad, we have that in common, right? We're both veterans. At least Rashad, quantifies his time in the business. I won't. A woman never tells her age, her weight, or her visa balance. Where's Chris? Okay, he left, right? And then finally, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison. As Rashad said, each one of us, each one of our holding companies, each one of the models in the industry are very, very different, but very much alike, based upon talent and people. My job, I'm actually the Chief People Officer. Hiring, firing, retaining, recruiting is an unbelievable job. That's really what CEOs do. I don't make anything tangible in the media business. I merge people and relationships together and provide great thinking like you just saw from Rashad. Okay, so here's one of my favorite Brits about change. And if you don't think that this industry right now is in the midst of change, it's constant. It's every single moment of my life, Monday through Friday, 7 days a week, because I have weekends. I'm just going to tell you this. We're just beginning the eruption of a cycle of our business, right? This is one of my favorite charts, and I have it laminated, and I carry it with me. I love what Gartner does, right? Because they give us an insight of what's coming and what's going to happen. This is a hype cycle, right? And what's a hype cycle? It kind of, motivates you, get your heart rate going, and understand the complexity of what's happening in our business right now. There was no such thing as a hype cycle 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. This is crazy. This is what marketers, advertisers, US sellers in this business. You better study something like this because our model was based upon media planning. What's media planning? I have no idea what that means. And if someone introduces himself as a media planner, that means they don't have a very good job because that means they don't know what they're doing. But understand in our business right now, I have to think about, I have a neuroscientist come in and talk to us. I feel like I'm in group therapy when I come into a meeting, but it's unbelievable. And Rashad, I hope that you agree with me on this to understand what you think about as a chief change agent, right, in a competitor. And by the way, Rashad and I are still in the Sears pitch right now together, aren't we? Yeah, it's still going on. Anyway, the point is on this is that it's the complexity of our business, and that, as you know, the world has changed. I'm sure you've seen some of these quotes. This is from one of what we call our innovation thinkers. I pay them to think. I don't care if they come to work. I don't care if I ever see them. I just want them to think, right? And that if you start to think about what's happening in our industry, there are no physical, tangible places for us, and yet all of these companies, from Uber to Airbnb to Amazon, and by the way, Amazon's opening a bookstore today. Did you happen to read about that? Is that crazy? I think I'm losing my mind, right? I should change that sign. You're right, Stuart. See? Journalism, it's still the best. I love it, right? And if you think about what it's like to have a relationship, my mother was in the hospital last week at 80 years old and suffered a massive heart attack. She was worrying about her cell phone at 80. I love that because guess what? She's connected to her 11 grandchildren across the world, right? And that if you start to think about what us is, or what we are, you have to understand that just what Rashad was talking about, and every other speaker you're going to hear, right? This is a crazy, crazy jammed up world, and advertising and selling your goods and services is much more complicated, right? You're going to hear all day about millennials. Guess what? They don't really care about us up here right now because they control the conversation. And you start to talk about what's happening with the ethnicity in our country. In our country is crazy. Do you know Rashad, when he's not here, he runs a foundation in India for education and learning, right? That's going to have a direct impact on what happens here in the US marketplace, right? So what are we really talking about here, hype versus reality in the agency business? Because that's what we're supposed to be talking about, right, Barry? The agency business. Billion-dollar holding companies make a lot of coin, right? And that model is not just going to be bent, it's going to be broke. And it should be broke because the business and the infrastructure and how we are built, right, can't have a longevity. And I know what Bob's talked a little bit about with the ANA and the 4As. It's going to be an interesting time because you're actually coming to talk to individuals like myself and Rashad in some of these questions, right? But if you think about what's happening and what's going to make meaningful change, talk about disruption. I love what REI did on Black Friday. They're closed. They want you to go exercise and they want you to take care of yourself and shop whenever you want. You don't have to worry about Black Friday, right? The upheaval in our business right now and really what's happening, you start to think about cultural influences. And I think about what's happening at McDonald's. A dear friend of mine there, Deb Wall, right, a veteran in the business. They're trying to do anything right now to reinvigorate, to jumpstart their business. They're going to be serving Big Macs in the morning and Egg McMuffins at midnight, right? Anything to get a consumer through the door, they don't care. The complexity, you're going to hear about that all day, right? You talked about NBC and Comcast, okay? That's one version of it, but sit on our side of the desk and understand the complexity of understanding audience behavior. How do you get to them and how do you actually insert creative, meaningful messaging? And then the whole loss of control. I can see all of you out in the audience right now, and 96% of you have a screen in front of you while we're all speaking, right? So what does that tell you? Something's really, really going on here, and the loss of control of messaging is even happening in this room. So let's talk a little bit about meaningful change and how do agencies actually create meaningful change, right? I think my job and the job of the 1,100 people here in North America of Havas Media is to create must-see media. And I wish that Chris was still here to talk about the importance and the value of creativity, because it is really about the idea, the essential ingredient of creativity, right? It's activation versus insertion. It has to be unique. And I know some of you work with us, and I hope that we challenge you on that, right? It's shareable content versus skippable. What does that mean? What would you say the average lifespan of a tweet is less than 8 minutes, right? And think about that on your own feed and what happens through there, right? Resonant versus redundant. And if you start to understand a little bit about what's happening on the insight side of our business and the power of the insight and how applicable that becomes to media strategies, to content development, to channel choice. And we're standing here, ironically, in a digital place-based association. And Barry, how many years have you been with the organization? 3 years. 3 years ago, no one even knew about this organization to the scale, to understand the power of the intimacy, right, of the messaging and the location. I think Rashad and I very much correlate in regards to this, right? For tech's sake, that's the common word every time you meet about tech stack, data, et cetera. Really, it is about what you do with the data and how do you actually manipulate and maneuver the data so it actually works to your advantage of the insights and becomes actually actionable, right? Memorable versus meaningless, right? The power of creativity right now and the power of creating the vault of content, to me, is the biggest challenge for advertisers, marketers, and by the way, agencies. And what do I mean about that? Because at Havas, we've been kind of working towards this. We moved thousands of people across the globe, tens of thousands of people, for media and creative to sit together side by side. I know that sounds very simplistic, but is really a blurring of cultures, people, humanity, to work for the common good of marketers, advertisers, and at the end of the day, consumers.